Welcome, Tim. How you doing?
I'm doing very well, Len. Thanks for calling.
You're quite welcome. So, as I mentioned to you earlier, the purpose of this interview is for Division 13 to kind of allow new members to see what's going on in different countries and give us an opportunity to chat and learn more about what you do. So, in that spirit, I'd like to ask you a few questions to kind of accomplish that feat. First one is, how did you decide to enter the field of coaching and/or clinical psychology?
Well, way back when I was in my undergraduate studies, I was working primarily with troubled youth. So kids in institutionalized, specifically incarcerated youth, both in the US and in Canada. I spent a fair bit of time working as an adventure-based counselor. And so that's what I thought I would be for the rest of my life. But I had, when I finished that work, I was invited to go back to the university that I had studied under and start working with a professor to run a research center on experiential training and development.
Right.
And so while I had that, initially that career focus around therapeutic change and individuals' growth, I started to do work in more organizational systems. And in both cases, I was very much engaged around using action-based learning or experiential approaches. And so that's what drew me into the field.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I remember doing a little bit of that with Pratt & Whitney when I was in my first career in private sector. We used action-based experiential learning with a lot of the executives, and it really brought out behaviors, and it was a nice metaphor for what they learned about themselves to be better leaders. So it's exciting, and we have that in common. So and that's a good answer. Can you describe your client base currently and how you have attracted these people into your practice?
Well, again, I feel like I still have a duality in focus in that I don't focus exclusively on organizational clients, but tend to be working with executive teams. And even then, I've worked with groups down to the shop floor level. So, steel manufacturers where fellas, and mostly guys, punch the clock to push pipe out the back of the factory, that kind of work. But I tend to be working in the C-suite with executive teams. And again, still deep dive into my bag of tricks around action-based learning or experiential adult learning methodologies. But I also occupy time in the counseling sector with folks that are either in crises, so maybe some trauma counseling, if that's what's triggered one to call a distress line. So I've been for 20 years affiliated with a distress line facility in the Ontario area. Also been doing suicide prevention training specifically for those folks that are crisis counselors on the line. So I like to keep my hands in both worlds because I think that that it sharpens the edge or the capacities that I have to be effective in both systems.
That's really cool. It's kind of a diversification that kind of gets you focused in several different ways to keep your edge going. That's great. It's good that Canada has a place for you to do that. So moving a little bit deeper, how would you describe the characteristics that continue to render you a successful coaching or clinical practitioner? What are those characteristics?
Well, I'm going to say that I use my ADHD as my superpower. So I'm constantly trying new things out, and so I don't lack focus. In fact, as we may know in this field, and when we talk about attention deficit disorder, it's what they want me to pay attention to. I'm really good at focusing on what I'm into, and that bounces all over the place. So I think my clients at the executive level come to appreciate that I bring that to the table. Yes, I design not treatment plans for groups, but rather, be it an agenda for a workshop or a run sheet for my co-facilitator and I to use as a guide. And in a moment, I might switch gears by saying, I think I'm noticing something here. Let's play this game. And so It would probably be a little bit like if Robin Williams and rest in peace, and Dr. Phil, as in the TV iconic psychologist, kind of joined forces and had a baby, that'd be me. I mean, that's kind of how I show up. Be that classroom, less so if it's, again, a therapeutic intervention. I'm not as off the wall. I might tone it down a bit, but I think that speaks to personality. It's just how I'm wired. Is what do you want to try now? And I have to really pay attention to how to manage that and meet the client where she or he is at. Yeah. Or the room full of executives. If that's just not how they're wired, then dial back, Tim.
Yeah, and that's great because you have that creativity that helps you do those types of things. And I could see how that would work in your favor. Let's see. What are the most important behaviors or initiatives that you would suggest to a new member or a member at large who wishes to expand or start a business for him or herself in this field?
Deep dive, and again, nobody twists my arm to do a public service announcement, but it's not the Bible, it's not my manual, but diving into what body of knowledge is available through Division 13 or any other through APA or other associations, regulatory bodies, whatever it might be, that you can get, best practices. Go hunt for thought leadership in those areas that relate to your own bag of tricks or therapeutic modalities. Again, whatever your language is that describes your practice. Go hunt for what's evidence-based, cutting edge, but also, and this is where I think I've kind of figured it out, is go looking for stuff that's way off, and that just may be myself, in left field or not aligned with the work you're doing, and say, how does that help me challenge my cognitive biases? What is it about that work and those outcomes that can inform where I meet with my clients, be that individual or organizational systems?
Yes. And I think that's a good counsel because it kind of speaks to that hunger to stay on top of your field and to be flexible and to meet as many people as need you to be in a position of knowledge. That's great.
Can I build on that a little bit, Len? Because I think an unrealized aspiration I have is to contribute to the body of knowledge, and I'm not there yet in my not an earlier career, but an earlier version of me as the Association for Experiential Education. I did a lot of conference presentations. I helped develop research findings, and I don't feel that I'm doing that yet. But I think that we also have a responsibility as members of a community practice to give back to that body of knowledge, even if we're rookies. Like I think of myself in the counseling field is starting over again pretty well.
Yeah.
But I do wish to be contributing, and I look forward to engaging with CP community practice that way. Sharing what's working, what's not, and learning from my peers, not just from the published research clinicians.
Well, that takes a certain amount of effort to do that, and I give you a lot of credit for doing that because that's important. And to stay current and to stay connected, those things make a lot of sense, and ultimately to give back. Having said that, what aspect of your practice do you find the most rewarding to you?
I'd say that when I see myself, if at the end of the day I can kind of walk away, or the end of the week, or perhaps the end of the therapeutic relationship, and feel that I was effective as a guide on the side rather than a sage on the stage. So, again, that might sound like a cliche or a t-shirt, that I wear, but I really do want to be a facilitator of the change process, individually or systemically, rather than being looked at as the content expert. Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if that's because I've done a fairly recent deep dive into narrative therapy around, she or he at the other side of the table or in the workshop or on the coaching call. They're the expert. It's their lives. It's their whatever organizational performance that they know way more than we could ever. We might ask some thought-provoking questions or have some techniques, tools that push them in the direction that they set for themselves. So that's where I feel like I do my best work as a guide on the side.
Yeah, that's interesting you should say that because there are people, colleagues of the past in our field, like Rogers, who would ask questions without saying anything and kind of provoke individuals to come up with some answers for themselves. And that type of facilitation is something that I think becomes a skill. So good for you.
But if it's okay, Len, I can tell a little anecdote is that it was hard for my children. They're adults now. They both have been through their own post-secondary. But Dad, what do you do for a living? Well, I kind of challenge people. I get paid by the question, kids. It's not like I have the answers. I provoke good dialogue within groups, wisdom of the crowd and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, geez, Dad, I thought you played games because they see all the props and toys and stuff, rock climbing gear and all that, rubber chickens and bandanas and blindfolds.
Yeah.
And so I do see, again, that secret sauce is being the ability to ask good questions, but to create a safe environment where people can really get into the stuff that they might not feel comfortable saying out loud in the boardroom or to their family.
Yeah. But that particular emotion triggers behaviors that could either work towards or work against them in the future.
That's my conceptual model anyways. Yeah, I think so. I think it can. A little truth serum by playing silly games.
Yeah. So to that effect, to what extent do you think intuition plays a role in the success of your practice?
It's a great question because I'm working with an organizational client next week, and I've had them fill out, I don't know if I really want to call it a personality inventory, but a styles difference around, it's called their genius, and I'm not going to brand it, but one of the dimensions of that tool is just that. I think they call it discerning around intuition, like what's my gut say we should try right now, like cut out the rest and focus on this. And I think, frankly, Len, I suck at that. And so I wrap myself around, or not safeguard, like I have a dependency upon, but I collaborate with colleagues that are much clearer on that than I. And so what would my friend Belinda do right now, as a co-facilitator? So kind of bringing in what others do around checking with their gut and trusting their intuition.
Yeah. And
I guess it's a little bit of that kind of the art and science.
Yep.
So yeah, I ran a research center for a few years and know a little bit about, some of the cutting edge evidence-based practices, but I think ultimately there's the art part too. It's just something, I got a niggle in my tummy that says, try this, let's see what this does right now, and offer it to clients, see what comes of it.
And I think that's important to be able to take that risk, because sometimes when I've been kind of stonewalled and I don't know where to go clinically, I just take a guess at what might be valuable, and many times more so than not, it is valuable to the client. And that's really what the bottom line is. Are they reaching the level of awareness that they should to get what they can out of the work? Lastly, I want to ask you, what are the unique aspects of the work you're doing? And you've already talked a little bit about that. Is there anything specific to your areas or country or on engagement and projects that you would like to share?
Well, I'm in Canada, right? And I'm not going to drop an A. My mother kind of talked me out of talking that way when I was growing up. Is that a question? So I have not yet, I think, finished the sentence with comma A.
Yeah.
But it is a fairly cautious culture. So even though by nature I'm an adventurer, recreationally and perhaps professionally, I invite people to try out things that push them beyond their comfort zone. But I do recognize that, and I've worked internationally. I've done a lot of work, global leadership programs with executive teams. I have even facilitated change within the United States correctional system, as well as with young offenders here in Canada. So just the caution of the Canadian culture. I find that the Canadian executive would more likely back up, say, let's not be that vulnerable. Let's not go that deep. That's just my experience. Is a little more tentative about how deep to dive in some of the issues.
Right, and that conservative nature is part of what you're dealing with in that culture. So it sounds like you're looking for ways to kind of manage that, and also in some ways work around it. So that's interesting.
Well, and again, I think that my secret sauce or my differentiator, and I don't do it better than any of the other folks that run in the circle that I've been facilitating, working with for years, decades, is that we invite people to play and to change, whether that's a therapeutic process or an organizational effectiveness, is let's just try it out. What's the worst is we feel silly, or we say stuff that we might not have said if we were in another setting. It's just creating that comfort zone so that they can try new ways of being with each other.
Right. And I think that's important in terms of getting the process down and having multiple people in a process. The emphasis on teamwork today is more so than it ever was. So you've got this diversity of skill sets, which is a good business issue, but it also requires more interpersonal skill. So your approach seems to make sense. Listen, I want to thank you for taking the time, especially since this is the second time we've worked together, to thank you very much for your time. And did you have any questions for me?
How'd you get into this particular Division 13? What drew you into that?
Good question. And it was probably a combination of experience. The first 20 years I was in business in Fortune 500 companies. And the next 12 years I taught at the university in the graduate school. So I went back in the middle of that time to get a doctorate, and I figured, what's the best division that would serve both avenues, and that was Division 13.
There you go.
Hey, so thank you.
My fave.
And we'll be in touch.
Thanks a lot, man.